Hello, and welcome to AI Insights, the Executive Brief. I'm Ben's AI avatar, here to introduce a new episode in our exciting series where we dive deep into the world of AI, business, and tech strategy. Each week, Ben Bohman chats with executives and thought leaders to explore the transformative impact of AI and discuss broader business and technology strategies. Today, we're thrilled to have Scott Stransky, the founder and content lead for Full Funnel Content, a boutique content development agency serving the B2B tech community. Scott has been a professional writer in the tech space since 2009.
AI is not going to take your job as a marketer. It's marketers who know how to use AI who are going to take your jobs. Because these lower skilled, lower sophistication content writers, copywriters, are the first ones to go. The next wave will be writers who only write kind of superficial blog posts. And this, I think, is what people are starting to recognize about generative AI, is that when it's formulaic, when it's predictable, AI is really, really good at it. But the first draft can get you probably 75 or 80% of the way.
Has been running Full Funnel Content since 2014. His agency works with companies big and small across the B2B tech spectrum, producing every type of content they might need to support their business growth and goals. Scott's unique approach focuses on understanding how to use content to answer buying questions rather than just focusing on the technology itself. His experience spans everything from customer advocacy to integration of AI and content creation. So sit back, relax, and get ready to gain some valuable insights from Scott Stransky on the interaction of AI and marketing and how to effectively engage a technical audience in today's fast-paced digital landscape.
My name is Scott Stransky. I'm the founder and content lead for Full Funnel Content, which is a boutique content development agency serving exclusively the B2B tech community. I've been a writer professionally in the tech space since 2009.
Couple years.
I think that's right. 2009. It might be 2008. I'm so old now that I've been doing it so long I can't even remember. But Full Funnel has existed as a brand since 2014, and we work with companies big and small all across the B2B tech spectrum, producing every type of content that they might need to support their business growth and their business goals.
Yeah, that's awesome. So walk me through Full Funnel Content, because it's interesting. You've been a writer for a while. Obviously, there's a marketing aspect to that. So you have a good understanding of marketing. You have a great understanding of writing. You've been doing it for a while. Full Funnel Content seems to really cater to a more technical crowd, a more technical style of writing. So what was the aha moment, the idea of this? Like, why did you do this?
Yeah, so I got my start as a writer, writing at a different agency, and it was a customer advocacy agency. So I started writing case studies for Adobe and Cisco and big tech brands right off the bat, and I knew absolutely nothing about their technology, nothing. So I was learning on the fly, and even today, like I think one of the secrets for people in my position, tech marketers, is a lot of us don't actually know how the technology works.
Right.
Like, we know what it does, we know why it's important to other people, and we know how people who understand how the technology works, how they talk about it.
Yeah.
And the better you are at sort of understanding how other people talk about it, the messages that resonate with people who are ultimately going to buy it, and you figure out how to mold all that together into a piece of content, those are the ones who are the more successful marketers. Yeah. Like, for me, I literally could not tell you how to turn on any of these technologies. I don't know how part A and how part B actually work. Yeah. I just know that they work, what they do individually, what they do together conceptually, and what impact that makes on a business as a whole and on individual teams in the target audience that we're writing for. So, it's not so much that I'm a technical person, but I am a marketing person. I have a degree in marketing, and like all good marketing students coming out of college, I got into sales first,
right?
Sales and client services. So I started learning the business kind of, from the outside in, and then eventually got pulled into an opportunity where I was taught how to write as a professional. And then I just sort of took the reins and ran with it from there to build it out into what it is today.
Yeah. And so you're hitting on something I think really important in technology in general. And I think even technologists get too much into the weeds of the technology that they forget
Yeah.
about the people that are working in it and forget about relating to people who, again, who work in it. So a good example is like a good sales engineer is able to really speak about the business objectives and talk to the people specifically and understand the crowd that they're talking to, and then talk about the technology. And I'm always, and even my Twitter handle is tech EIQ, right? So EQ over IQ. And I always say it's probably because I
Right.
have a higher EQ than IQ. So I'm going to go that way, right? I'm going to push it. But in technology, there's a huge need to connect to a broader audience of
Yeah.
people who don't understand technology. And even if you look at often CTOs and CIOs are very bright and very intelligent people, but they are technology strategists. They're also not going to be the people who can get into the weeds of often. Sometimes they can, but very often they can't get into the weeds. So being able to write to a broader audience, being able to communicate to a broader audience really has a more profound effect than getting into the weeds of that addresses a very small audience, right?
It does, and I would take it a step further, because one of my hot takes, and whether or not you agree with it, I don't know, but
Okay.
at an enterprise technology level, the technology these days kind of all does the same stuff anyway,
Yeah.
right? The difference between like Azure and Google Cloud Platform and AWS is maybe a feature here and a feature there and the
Yeah.
name on the platform. But by and large, they all do the same thing. So really, from a marketing perspective, the only thing that is really different, between AWS and Azure, for example, is the people behind the scenes running the platform, making it go, and the
Hmm.
people using the platform to do something for business.
Yeah.
So I think generally from a tech marketing perspective, if you can figure out how people, like what questions people have about how to use the technology in their business, and you sort of reverse engineer your
Yep.
approach to selling or marketing that way, rather than really focusing on the nuts and bolts of what the technology is, more so than what it does and why
Yep.
you should care. That's where the real juice is. And I think that's largely what I excel at personally and what my team
Yeah.
excels at. And that's where we put our energy, is to, understanding how to use content to answer buying questions rather than technology questions.
Yeah. I love that. And I've always been a huge proponent of people, processes, and technology in that order. Right. And
Mhm.
I think so often, again, you're right, people get into the technology first and they get excited about it. But guess what? If you don't understand the people and the processes, if you don't understand the business, it's irrelevant. It reminds me, I don't know if you remember the old CDW commercials. And there
Yeah.
was this one where the owner, like he's a president up there, and they're at a board meeting, and one of the junior guys goes, I think we should do this. And he moves his hand left to right. And then
I
the
remember
president
that
says the
one.
exact same thing. And everyone goes, oh, yeah, that's a great idea. And he's like, I just said that. He goes, yeah, but I went like, I said this. And he
Uh-huh.
moved his hand up and down, not left to right. And it just,
Yep.
that, I mean, it's so true with technology, because you're right. There's so many things in technology that are, there's not a lot that separates the technology, and there might be little things, and I mean
Yeah.
just very minor things, but it's really the people. And then you get into technology and day two support and implementation and all the things that actually really matter with the technology, and that's what you're talking about, is drawing it into the business and how it's applicable to be used.
Yeah, I mean, this is from a customer storytelling perspective. So one of the things that I believe from a tech marketing perspective, and I'm sure this will dovetail into the AI conversation.
Hmm.
But when you kind of zoom out, all technology automates, accelerates, secures, optimizes something, right? They all do and say the same thing. So the message that you need to get out into the market is not that our feature is better than their feature, is that our people are smarter and more committed and more creative,
Yes.
and our customers are happier, and yada yada yada. And part of that happiness, though, is not because it's been a perfect experience. And in fact, I think it's quite the opposite. That when it comes to like a software deployment, marketers love to try to paint this picture that that their software deployments are perfect.
Right.
And we all know is nonsense. There's no such thing. There's always a roadblock. There's always an obstacle. There's
Yeah.
always a problem. And the real opportunity that I think a lot of brands and businesses miss from a marketing and sales perspective is using those failures, using those uh, unexpectedly bumpy deployments and onboarding to their advantage. Yeah,
Yeah.
it didn't go as planned, but here's what we did to overcome it and make sure that everything else went according to plan and that the client was happy. And that is a real differentiator because, again, your technology is probably doing what your competitor's technology is doing.
Yeah.
But did their team, did their people step up and step in to fix things as quickly and as creatively and thoroughly as yours did when something inevitably went wrong?
Yeah.
So that's not even a technology problem. That's a people problem and a process problem. So, zooming in on those, I think is really where you start separating yourself from other people, from other competitors in the market.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love it because there's nothing for me being a technology strategist. There's nothing that upsets me more than a company that can't admit their own failures or that
Yeah,
they have problems,
yeah,
and it's just, there's a realness to it because if they can't admit, like if they're like, hey, everything's smooth, it's perfect, we know it's not. But
yep.
like you said, if you can actually admit like, hey, look, we've had problems, but we
Mhm.
were able to step in. This is how we solved them. And this is why we might not be having this problem anymore because we learned from it. There's
Yeah.
a humility to that approach. And in technology, it's definitely missing in a lot of cases. So before we jump into the AI conversation, you've got to, it looks like it's at Lisbon. I think you
It
live
is
in
Lisbon.
Lisbon, right? So
I
what,
do.
I've wanted to ask why Lisbon? Like, how'd you end up there?
It's kind of a longer story, but the short version is that when I was in high school, I went and spent a month in Spain with a family, and I fell in love with it.
Mhm.
And from that moment, I decided when I got back to the States, and my parents picked me up at the airport and asked me how it was, and I said I'm going to move there
Mhm.
someday. And then I met my wife, and she always wanted to live in Europe too, but kind of wherever.
Right.
So we honeymooned in Spain, and we were dead set on moving there. The process was laborious, we'll say. So
Mhm.
what, and really, really long. So while we were waiting, the 9, 10, 11 months, however long it took, we had a bunch of friends come out of the woodwork, said, listen, I know you love Spain, but have you checked out Portugal? We went and we actually liked it better. And I was like,
Okay.
well, no, I haven't considered it, but we've got time on our hands, so let's go.
Right.
So we came to Lisbon for 10 days, did a scouting trip, and on the fifth day we were looking around, we're like, yeah, I want this. So we
Mm.
got home back to the States, put our application in, and got approved, and we're like, okay, I guess we're moving to
Wow.
Lisbon. So we've been
Wow.
here a little over 2 years, and we are up for our first visa renewal next month, actually. And then once we're approved for that, we'll be here another 3 years, at which point we'll be eligible to apply for citizenship and that EU passport. So we will be truly citizens of the
Right.
world.
Yeah, you'll be able to move freely.
Exactly.
Although you
My
pretty
my
much can, but
my
yeah.
ultimate dream, honestly, is I want to spend a couple of months a year in Colorado
Yeah.
and the rest of the year traipsing about Europe somewhere.
Just doing that. Well, you're really close to that dream, obviously, like
Getting there.
closer
We're
than
getting there.
most. So
We're
that's
getting there.
awesome. Yeah, congrats on that. It's rare where you're like, hey, mom, dad, I'm gonna live here. And even though
Yep.
you know Portugal, that's still in the in the
Close enough.
vicinity
I
of,
mean, it's
yeah,
a 5-hour drive to Madrid. Or
exactly. So yeah,
yeah,
and then you pulled it off. So some dedication there. That's awesome. Okay, so AI.
I
Let's
got
jump into this. Like the
yeah.
AI in writing, AI in marketing. It's such an interesting conversation. When did you first see or notice, or when did it first come on your radar? Because machine learning, AI, it's been around
Yeah.
a long time, 10 plus years
Yeah.
now. Where it's relevant to marketing and where it's actually putting up good enough, I'm not saying great content, but
Yeah.
maybe getting us 40% there, 50% there. When did you start noticing this was going to be something?
So a while back, actually a number of years ago, 2016, I worked for an NLP software company as their marketing manager. So that was my first introduction to natural language programming, into chatbots, into enterprise search, and the marketing applications for chatbots and enterprise search.
Mhm.
The technology back then wasn't that great. The language models weren't very good. The company that I worked for employed a small army of linguists and computational linguists. So I learned a lot more about like the technology than I ever thought I would.
Mm.
And it wasn't until the GPT announcement, like the ChatGPT launch, the OpenAI launch,
Yeah.
that it really came to the forefront that this is actually a thing that marketers could use at scale or in a day, in their daily operations. Because like up until then, you had your chatbots and AI powered or AI something or other tools. Maybe it was Grammarly, maybe it was an editor tool, maybe it was one other point solution, and that was it. But
Yeah.
the AI was not very good. It wasn't really AI. It was just some basic algorithms that could do some stuff that was a little bit better than what you could do as a human. But when OpenAI launched ChatGPT officially to the public, was the first time that it really struck me as, oh my God, it's here.
Mhm.
And then immediately after that, we started, okay, well, everybody else has already been preparing for this to incorporate this. So that's when you end up with Jasper and
Right.
Copy.ai and Writer.ai and all these other writing specific AI tools. So what was that, 2 years ago, 3 years
Yeah.
ago now, I guess is probably the launch date
Yep.
for most of these. And that's really when it first came into my purview and into my conscious. But I didn't actually really want to do anything with it until, probably within the last year when I felt like the quality of the technology was such where there was actually some value and some
Useful.
utility to it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so you talk about how it's relevant, and I still say it is very relevant in marketing, but there's still a lot of work. It gets you partially there, but not all the way there.
Yeah.
But how do you see it being embraced? And I ask this because I think this is funny with marketing, because marketing has been pissing off technologists for decades now, right? And you know what I mean by that? Like this is the cutting edge this, and as a technologist, you're
Yeah.
always like, this is just marketing buzzwords. It's not,
Yep.
doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
This is the first technology that I've seen actually strike a little bit of fear into marketers, where they're like, oh no, am I going to be relevant? Is it going to work?
Yeah.
And of course you will be. The good marketers will, because they're going to use it to rise to the top. What are you seeing in that aspect?
That's a good point that like most of the buzzwords that people use in corporate America, marketers are the ones that came up with it. So
Exactly.
we're responsible for thinking outside the box and, circling back and taking things offline. So everything that you hate about corporate America, a lot of it is marketers' fault, including the words that we use to describe how these cutting edge technologies or bleeding edge
Right.
technologies impact the world. As far as Gen AI goes for marketers, um, immediately you've seen two camps, right? You've got on one side the uh, never AI people. AI will never
Yeah.
replace me. I'm a human. It can't do it. It can't now do what I do. It never will be able to do what I do because I'm a human and it's a machine. And then on the other end, you've got all AI all the time, and those are the business leaders only interested in cost cutting and riffs and all that. In the middle, the messy middle is kind of where everybody else lives. And from a job replacement standpoint, when it comes to marketers, job displacement
Hmm.
standpoint, when it comes to marketing, you're already starting to see some of it with the more rote style of writing, product descriptions, social
Yeah.
media pieces, the stuff that doesn't take a lot of creativity. It's pretty formulaic. It's pretty soft and generic. um, I think everybody foresaw that being immediately replaced.
Hmm.
What I think is starting to strike a little bit of fear into, I guess more experienced or more multi-skilled content creators is how good the video has gotten, how good audio replication has gotten, and frankly, how decent the writing has gotten. There's still, signals that something was generated with or it was written with AI, right? They're
Yeah.
delving into this
Yeah.
and the
Keen.
ever-evolving landscape, right? There are certain buzzwords and and,
Yeah.
and telltale signs. Over time, I expect that those will probably be trained out of those models as they get fine-tuned. But there was, you know, there's saying out there, and I can't remember who the quote is attributed to. Oh, it was Scott Galloway,
Mm.
said that, AI is not going to take your job as a marketer. It's marketers who know how to use AI who are going to take your jobs. And I think you're
I love that.
already starting to see that, because these lower skilled, lower sophistication content writers or copywriters are the first ones to go.
Yeah.
The next wave will be writers who only write kind of superficial blog posts, listicles, the 5 best things for this, that, or the other, or how to do X,
Hmm.
Y, and Z, because they're also very formulaic. And this, I think, is what people are starting to recognize about generative AI, is that when it's formulaic, when it's predictable, AI is really, really good at it. It's
Yeah.
really good at producing a really solid draft. It's not a great draft. Like, you're not ever going to send it directly from machine to the client and say, "Hey, I wrote my first draft."
You shouldn't.
But the first draft can get you probably 75 or
Yeah.
80% of the way on a lot of different things. And eventually, as the models get better and better and better, that number might creep up to 90 or even 95. And at that point, you're just a prompt engineer and a content editor. And that's okay too. That, it's still a job, but that's probably the next wave of content writers
Yeah.
that'll be replaced. Beyond that, though, and this is where I think we're starting to, the AI companies, the AI sellers, and the AI users are starting to find a little bit of friction,
Yeah.
is that anything after that level, when it comes to telling really compelling, multi-threaded, complex, human-oriented stories, AI can't do it.
Yeah.
Only people can do that. And I think that's always going to be the case. And so that's why in our business, we're leaning really heavily into SME-led content and customer-led content,
Hmm.
and using generative AI in different ways, whether it's brainstorming or outlining or generating first drafts and summarizing transcripts and all these other things that feed into our ability as humans to tell an authentic story in a way that AI simply can't. So
Yeah.
when it comes to job replacement, I think a lot of the damage has already been done. There's still a wave to go.
Hmm.
Same thing with graphic designers and video producers. Their jobs, at a certain level of sophistication are probably at stake. But beyond that, the stuff that really resonates with buyers, the content that really answers buying questions, customer testimonials, like directly from the horse's mouth, SME-led insights directly from the experts'
Yeah.
opinions and perspectives. Those are things that cannot be replicated or replaced by AI. So those are, I think, the last bastion of human-led content creation that just aren't going to be touched anytime soon
Yeah.
by AI.
Yeah. There's so many. I think there's a lot of technology examples with this. And I always think of a calculator. First of all, when I was in high school, a calculator was lazy. You couldn't use a
Yep.
calculator.
You're not
I
going to be able to use your calculator walking through
exactly.
the grocery store.
Right.
And
Remember,
then,
we used to have the watches. We'd
yeah,
have a watch that we could like kind of the newer age watches, and we're like, oh, this is awesome. But yeah, you couldn't use a calculator. But the
yep,
reality is that someone who understands math and really is a mathematician, they know all the crazy functions and buttons on a calculator that I have no clue what they do. I'm like, I don't know
yeah,
what this does. But they can
yeah,
really manipulate a calculator. They can manipulate even more so an Excel spreadsheet and all that. And I think what you're talking about is exactly where AI is going to go. The people who learn how to use AI, and then people who have direct knowledge and competency in that skill set, whether it's video creation, marketing, writing, they're going to be the ones who can manipulate and get the most out of AI. They're going to use AI almost as a canvas, right?
yeah,
To be able to create some really cool stuff, because you still have to have imagination
yes,
to do it. And then another interesting thing you pointed out, and that's that human AI writing in a human, like being able to put a human touch on it. I can get AI to write a story, a really interesting piece, like one paragraph about myself. But if I
Right.
go longer than that, it uses the same example and the same
Yep.
writing example. It can't get creative beyond that. It will just always, it's just repetitive. That might be figured out, it might not. But it is going to be, like you said, I've heard reimagining. It's gonna that's a marketing term, I'm sure.
Yep.
Good
It totally
job.
is.
I know a technologist didn't come up with that. So reimagining,
Reimagining and re-envisioning all those things.
re-envisioning. Yeah,
That's marketing.
exactly. But yeah, it will be interesting. What do you think about and we talked about how in really November-ish, October-ish, 3 years GPT came
Mhm.
out, or the Gen AI. But what do you think in technology? How everyone's suddenly a AI company, and I know you work
Right?
like suddenly everyone's AI. It's like, wait, but you're the same thing you were a year ago.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a keeping up with the Joneses. It's definitely a sales and marketing driven thing, right? Because
Yeah,
like a lot of like what you pointed out earlier, a lot of the AI actually isn't AI. It's just machine learning. It's
yeah,
other forms of algorithmic technology, but you can conveniently slap an AI label on it because the layperson doesn't actually know what AI is versus what AI isn't.
hmm,
So it's very much of a Me Too or an Me Also, keeping up with the Joneses type positioning. Um, I think it puts a stronger emphasis, or it shines a brighter spotlight on how important having a human personality behind all of that is. Because if everybody's doing, I equate it to like case studies, right? It used to be, if you think back 10, 15 years ago, only big tech companies were producing like these long form written case
yeah,
studies. Yeah, they would do an interview and of their big name customer, and they'd write this really narrative style thing with some pull quotes, and it's really beautifully designed, and it would cost them like 5 grand just to do one.
yeah,
So only big companies could do it. Now everyone can do it, and everyone does do it, and that's why all the case studies now sound and look and feel the same,
mm,
right? Everybody is the technology caught up, the costs came down, and now case studies are table stakes.
yeah,
They're the base level of what you need to be competitive in the market. I think AI is going to be exactly the same thing, where it started out where only big companies with deep pockets could afford to build or could afford to buy, and now you're seeing it more democratized. So now you and me as individuals have access to really powerful tools. Maybe not quite to the extent that Google and
right,
big tech
right.
companies have, but we have more capability now than we ever had in the past, where we can actually compete as an individual with a company 10,000 times our
Yeah,
size. And so AI is no longer a real differentiator for companies. Now it's just table stakes. Of course you use AI. Of course your solution is AI powered. Whether or not it actually is irrelevant, but everybody is now operating from roughly the same starting point. What can you do, or what do you do that is different or better than everyone else? And that comes down to your humanity.
yeah, I love that. And if you think about marketing, really the goal of marketing is stand out above
Yeah.
and
Yep.
apart from. And your Stanton sales probably taught you the same thing. Is you could go in and do the same thing that every other sales rep was doing, but that's not very successful. How do you
Exactly.
stand out? And I think in this in the age of AI driven content, we use an AI word there, in the world of AI. So in this
Yeah.
all this AI driven content, it's going to start just bleeding together and blending together. So to stand out, this human touch,
Mhm.
the connection of humanity in this, and not just in marketing and not just in sales, but overall in business. I think it's going to be very interesting how businesses leverage humanity to
Mhm.
intensify and enhance AI, and to stand apart from everyone else, instead of just using AI to just plug through, just like churn through content and churn through stuff. How do we stand out? And that's, again, not just marketing, that's across the board.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what you're talking about, is that human
Yep.
touch.
100%, because I think you're already starting to see the confluence of content, right?
Yeah.
You go to pick 3 tech company websites and read their blogs. And I can almost guarantee you that if it's a, top 10 ways to do this, or, here's a,
Yep.
whatever it is, it's going to look, feel, and sound the same, because if it's AI generated, it's all been trained on basically the same public data, or it's public to us, private to OpenAI, or whoever's running the model that you're using. But it's everybody's instance is trained on the same data, so the output is going to be the same, roughly the same stuff, right? The input is the same, so the output has to be the same.
Yeah.
We're already seeing that. The analogy that I like to draw here is that you're basically taking a glass of water and dumping it into the ocean. You are just pouring more of the same into the same. So that the only way to stand out, the only thing that would be different, is to change the inputs. And the way that you change the input is to go to humans rather than to the machines first. So this is where you're interviewing subject matter experts, not because they're expert in a particular technology, but also because they're human with unique experiences, right? You got to the point where you are in your career. There might be another CTO out there. You know, you take two CTOs or two CIOs or two marketing directors, they have the same title, they work for a similar type of company, but their pathway to get there was completely different. And that shaped who they are, what they do, how they think, what their preferences are, and you know, all of those things. So when you change that input, starting with the human level, you know, going to a subject matter expert and asking their opinion, not necessarily, well, what do you know, but more importantly, what do you think? What do you believe? There's nothing in the large language models that can compete with that. There's nothing in those models that can take what, you know, what that person is thinking and create an output so authentic, so human, so personal, that resonates with the audience the same way. It's not possible now with the technology. I don't see how it would be possible in the future. I can game out a scenario where, like right now, one way that you could do it would be to like if it's human versus machine and you're writing the same topic. If you're a human, you would probably want to slip in some like cultural reference, like pop culture reference, or a current event. You could probably train AI to do something similar. But I remember I wrote a blog a couple of years ago. And sorry, I'm going off on a tangent.
No, this
here.
is good.
It's all about the humanity and the specificity. Because I remember a number of years ago, I went to this to Digital Marketing Summit, and Seth Godin was there as a speaker. I'm not a huge Seth Godin acolyte, but he said something that really resonated with me. That his phrase was, "People like us use words like this or do things like this." Whatever interpretation. You know, the upshot being that if you are a certain type of person, if you're a certain profession, if you're a certain whatever, certain lot in life, you do a certain number of or a specific number of things. You do things a specific way. And I wrote a blog about this using a really cheesy police procedural on TV featuring Tom Selleck. So Blue Bloods.
Okay.
And I remember I was watching this episode of Blue Bloods where one of the characters called for an emergency vehicle. Now, you and I would say, "Oh my God, I need an ambulance because something happened."
Right.
But this person said instead, "I need a bus at this address." And watching this at like 1 a.m, it really stood out to me. I was like, why would you choose the word bus?
Right.
My assumption is that emergency responders, cops and first responders, EMTs, would call an ambulance a bus.
Yeah.
Whereas lay people would call it an ambulance.
Yeah.
So where I'm going with this is that level of specificity in the vocabulary signifies what group you belong to. In order for AI to know that, you have to figure out how to train that at scale and then train it when and how properly to implement it. So if I were writing a blog as a human versus an AI to see which one is going to resonate more, I'm going to slip in things like that. I'm going to slip in current events, pop culture references, and I'm going to choose my words that indicate that I know that I'm one of you in a way that the machine simply can't. And I think that's where talking to subject matter experts, talking to customers and users of your technology, that's something that AI is just not going to be able to capture in a way that is meaningful and resonant with audiences, because your humans are always going to speak differently than how a machine would.
Yeah. Yeah, and this gets me just brainstorm. Just my mind's like thinking about so much stuff. But I've started recording a lot of stuff and
Mhm.
feeding it into AI. And when I write something personally, like I actually, instead of writing, which I don't really write how I talk, I don't know if a lot of people do. And I think it's a very special talent to be able to do that. But I've started recording myself. And I think with what you're talking about, it just seems like having being able to record, that is one way that AI can, that I've found gets more of a human kind of writing style, is when I record myself talking and I'm just talking as maybe something I'm competent with or something I understand. And then use this wording, right? Use this type of wording for it.
Mhm.
And it is interesting though that there are going to be ways. I think we're going to have to get creative with how we give this voice and start working with it. But you're right, 100%. That's what's going to separate us apart and that's what people are looking for, is not general insights that everyone else is putting, but when you say something because of your years of experience in marketing, your years of
Mhm.
experience in writing, you're going to use phrases, and do they call it colloquial terms? Is that
Yeah,
like
yeah.
something like that? Like some,
Colloquialisms
yeah,
and
like that we want to be able to use. So now I want to ask an ethical question about AI. This is
yep.
always something that's interesting to me, is the ethics. It's why I love having the conversation of AI, because we can talk about um, psychology in AI. We can talk about philosophy in AI, and maybe this is ethics and philosophy kind of at the same time. But Elon Musk has his, and I always ask this because it's interesting. He has the Neuralink, right? A
Yep.
chip implanted in your head. Now, okay, I am worried about someone being able to hack my brain and all this other
Yes,
stuff. Take
very
that
much.
aside. My dream is to speak every single language. If I had a superpower, I could speak every language in the world. And then I say, okay, if I could put a chip in my brain and I could speak every language in the world, would I do that? Would that be enough to do it? Do you see that really be? I see it as being a futuristic technology we could have. Is that something you would be interested in, or what's
I'm
your
kind of
thoughts?
I'm actually in the same headspace as you with that at my age and how far we are from that technology reaching critical mass, by the time it got to the point where it was proven and safe and robust enough, I'm probably at the end of my life. I would not at that point, I would probably just take the risk, because
Right,
what
we
the
already
hell?
have cognitive decline.
Right, exactly. I mean, what the hell? If you're gonna hack my brain, maybe you'll put something better in it. I don't know. Um, uh,
That's funny.
if I were 15 or 20 years younger than I am now, if I were in my teens or my 20s even, uh, I think it would be a much harder question to answer,
Yeah,
and a lot of that comes down to how much you value being at like an early adopter, or at least at the same level as the rest of society, versus how much you value your individualism or your individuality, right? Because I know a lot of people, like my dad, basically a Luddite, right? He's just not a technology guy. He joined Facebook a couple of years ago and he was just over the moon excited. This is the same
yeah.
person that said he would never get a cell phone because he didn't want to be tethered. Now he does this all the time. So obviously your opinions change, but how important it is to you to be on that cutting edge or be sort of toward the head of the
Yeah.
pack, I think is going to influence whether or not right now you would theoretically say yes or no to that kind of technology. Because if you're one of those people who likes being connected, who likes being, at least in the middle of the pack or the front of the pack developmentally,
Hmm.
you're probably going to be one of the first, you know, uh, you're going to be in line to adopt, maybe not the first generation, but maybe like the third or the fourth.
Sure.
But if you're the opposite end of the spectrum where you just want to be who you are, then you're probably going to resist until it's absolutely necessary, or until you reach the end stages of your life where
Yeah.
the risks are virtually nil and you're like, ah, cool, why not? I'll check it out and
Yeah.
see. see what kind of experience it is.
Yeah, I'm drawing a lot of, it's funny as you're talking through that. I haven't thought about this, but it's drawing a lot of comparisons to steroids, like usage in
Yeah,
bodybuilding and in athletics, right? There's
yeah,
people who want to push themselves to a level that isn't humanly possible. And whether
yep.
that's athletics or it's just from a fitness standpoint, and they're willing to take the risk of their liver, their heart, kidneys, all
Mhm.
the things that steroids are known to cause a problem with, and they're willing to take that risk because they want to be on that cutting edge from a
Yeah.
fitness level. Yeah, and like you said, maybe there won't be as much risk, but there is kind of a psychological like tie into that.
The funny thing is, like, my answer would actually be different if we went to, remember that movie Limitless,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Bradley
Very
Cooper
much.
with the
Uh,
NZT pill?
yep.
If that existed, I would probably try that. The risks be damned. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure ethically or morally what the difference is to me between taking a pill that allows me to tap into 100% of my brain, or implanting a Neuralink that gives me access to all the knowledge in the history of humanity,
Yeah.
accessible without having to click on anything. I don't know what that delta is. I don't know
Yeah.
why I would be willing to take one almost
Right.
without hesitation and not the other. But if NZT were a real thing, I would 100% take it.
Yeah, the effects of that, you'd be like, just to feel that for like one day would be just an amazing feeling. Like how Bradley Cooper felt in that. It would be
Yeah.
like, oh my
Well,
gosh, like just
I'll tell
dominant.
you though, like the plot hole in that, it's kind of like all the genie movies. Like the
Yeah.
plot hole in that movie was, if you're that smart and you have access to that much brain power, why wouldn't you come up with a solution first?
Right.
Wouldn't you come up with an antidote to all the bad stuff, like, and dedicate your brain power until you figured that out and then go and achieve everything else? It's like
Yeah.
when you, oh, I found this this magic lamp with a genie. Oh, give me, what are your three wishes? I want infinite wishes. I
Yeah.
stop there. Well, you can't have that. Okay, well, what can I have? Right. And
Yeah.
you try to multiply your opportunity first, and then once you have an understanding of the quantity of what's available to you, then you start selectively doing what you want to do with it.
Yeah, well, and that
That's the way.
genie, that there's always a trade-off, right? If you look at any
Yeah,
kind of movie with like about genies or whatever those are, like there's always a trade-off with it. And you're right. I mean, steroids, there's a trade-off with it.
yep,
With that pill, there was a trade-off with it, and even with this, there's probably going to be something that you're going to trade, and also that creativity that you talk about is
yeah,
interesting as well because okay, am I just going to be? And we talk about the IQ and EQ. Is it going to make me super high IQ? And then I'm going to lose my EQ because I've met people with extremely high IQ, and
yeah.
I'm like, I can't communicate with you because you can't communicate on this side.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think Elon's probably an ideal
Yeah.
representation of that,
Yeah.
right?
And he admits, admittedly so. Yeah. He admits it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like people in his general, I don't even know what, in his general profile, right?
Mhm.
Super, super intellectually smart, not nearly as socially intelligent
Right.
or emotionally equipped and emotionally intelligent. I think it's a real risk, and I think if you back it up to what we were talking about earlier with the non-implantable AI, that there's a real fear of people, or and I can foresee a scenario where the external AI advances at such a rate where a lot of my job or a lot of jobs could be automated. I could choose to put a lot of my job on autopilot
Yeah.
and let the AI do it. In which case, what am I actually doing with myself?
Hmm.
Right? Because if the AI can handle routine automation and it can start to handle more creative tasks and it can do everything in between, what is left for me? Because I
Hmm.
think some people naively say, "Oh, well, I'll just play golf all the time, or I'll go swimming, or I'll do all
Right.
these things physically." Those people probably haven't tried to play golf 4 or 5 times a week.
Right.
Probably haven't gone running, 4 or 5 times a week. They haven't been on an airplane traveling around the world for multiple weeks at a time. It's exhausting and it eventually gets boring.
Yeah.
So I worry a little bit about the AI developing to a point where we become so reliant on it to do our work for us that we devolve into more of a lazy mass. I think idiocracy might be the ultimate extreme example of what could happen. But somewhere short of idiocracy, I do worry that there will be a significant swath of the population that doesn't really have a lot to do on a day-to-day basis. And when you're bored and you don't have a lot of stimulation, problems arise both personally, like in your own mind, but also societally and socially in between people. So I do keep that worry in the back of my mind when you're talking about like ethics and potential societal impacts of AI. But I think we're a long ways away from any of that actually happening.
For sure. Yeah, there's a Rick and Morty episode where the dinosaurs come down to Earth, and they basically do that. They take care of everything, so there's no hunger. Like, they solve every single problem. No one has to work, and society just kind of starts to have issues, right? And then there's resentment, there's groups, and it's kind of a funny episode, but it's the Rick and Morty dinosaurs episode. I can't remember all of it, but I just remember that's the premise is there's no problems. And it ends up being a problem that there's no problems. But anyhow, so last thoughts. Okay, I'm going to give you last thoughts. Just anything else you want to add? Also, of course, how can people get a hold of you or for full funnel content? Obviously, talk a little bit about what you're doing. I think you're doing some really exciting stuff with that. So yeah, go ahead. Last thoughts.
Yeah. So a couple last thoughts. I think we're a ways away from an AI overtake of a lot of marketing jobs for the same reason, but different applications. Deployment or adoption into business is a lot harder than I think people understand.
Yeah.
On the big company side, they have the money and the means and probably the goals for wanting to implement AI wherever they can. Problem is, they still have people working there, and those people have different agendas, different opinions, different, usually competing agendas, competing opinions. There's a lot of friction internally at big companies. That's why nothing ever gets done quickly there. If you've ever tried to get a purchase order through their purchasing departments, it's a multi-month ordeal just to get a contract signed. Right. So if people think that they're going to replace entire departments, entire marketing and sales departments with some magical AI, and it's going to happen in a year or 2 years or 5 years, they're living in fantasy land. On the opposite end, same problem, but different perspective is with smaller companies. They probably have the agility. They don't have the internal friction. They don't have all these competing agendas to want to do that, but they also don't have the money. They don't have the knowledge. They don't have the know-how or the desire or necessarily the skills to roll this out or implement AI in an intelligent manner that actually can replace a lot of the functions that the AI would be intended to replace. So for everybody freaking out that their job is coming to an end, like we talked about at the beginning of the conversation, the low sophistication jobs, the ones that don't require a lot of thought or creativity or a lot of effort, quite frankly, those are going to get automated out and replaced pretty quickly if they haven't all been already. Yeah. But for higher functioning, cognitively more significant loads or more significant cognitive loads, those types of jobs, they're not in danger of being replaced en masse anytime soon, simply because of the nature of how business works. So that's one final thought.
Okay.
The second final thought, I think marketers in general are using generative AI wrong. Instead of always pumping out net new content, going to ChatGPT, going to Claude, going to Gemini, and saying, write me a blog about this because I just had a thought. Instead of always going for net new, why not repurpose or retarget? So that's what we're working on at Full Funnel internally is using AI to take a piece of content that we've written for one human, one audience, or one market, using the same core information, the same strategic argument, the same base level data and rewriting it for a different persona or a different audience without having to go back out to the general language model data set and risk pulling in stuff that's no longer relevant or frankly incorrect. So I think this reliance on AI to produce net new content instead of more specific, more targeted, more personalized content is a massive miss. It is a massive mistake from marketers. And the ones who can figure out how, as you pointed out, how to use technology, how to use this AI to create more personalized, more one-to-one, interactive, engaging content for their buying audience, whether it's one person or 25 people on a buying committee, they're the ones who are going to find more success in the era of AI.
Love it. Scott, this has been fun and
Always.
insightful. I've loved it. So thank you so much. I definitely look forward to collaborating with you more. But again, thanks for taking the time, jumping on from Lisbon. I know it's a little later over there, but again, I appreciate it. And I appreciate your thought leadership.
Yeah. And if anybody wants to connect with me, I'm a LinkedIn power user. Find me there. I'm the bald guy with Lisbon in his background. So I'm open to connect and hope you are too.
Love it. Thank you.
Thanks, man.